The price of a purring engine, a Judge Judy story of love, lies, and a motorcycle's roar. The air in the television studio was cool and still, a stark contrast to the emotional storm about to break within its walls. Under the unwavering gaze of Judge Judy, a drama was set to unfold, a tangled web of betrayal, a purring engine, and the high cost of a bruised ego. The plaintiff, a man named Jake with a weary look in his eyes, stood opposite the defendant, a woman named Chloe, whose posture was a fortress of defiance. This wasn't just a case about money. It was the autopsy of a relationship that had exploded, and the pieces left behind were a wrecked motorcycle and shattered trust. The heart of the matter, the central, gleaming, and problematic object, was a motorcycle. But to understand how a machine became the center of a legal battle, one must first understand the people, their promises, and the painful discovery that shattered their fragile world. Jake and Chloe had been a couple, or at least they had been in some version of a relationship that was as clear as mud. Jake, a 33-year-old personal trainer, had been going through a tumultuous period. His mother, a woman he loved more than anything, had been battling cancer, a fight that drained not just her spirit but his finances. He had made the ultimate sacrifice, quitting his job and even selling his own car to help cover her mounting medical bills. He was a man adrift, living back at his mother's home in Oak Grove, his life put on hold. It was into this chaos that Chloe had re-entered, or perhaps firmly planted herself. She lived in Rockland, a solid 40-mile commute from Jake, a distance that became a constant point of friction. She wanted him closer, tired of him spending a fortune on Lyft rides just to see her. She presented a solution, an offer that seemed like a lifeline. "Come over to my house," she had said. And so, for a period of time that was as disputed as everything else in their story, he claimed it was a month, then 3 weeks, then settled on moving out on a Saturday. The 21st, Jake moved in with Chloe. It was to be a new chapter, a chance for him to find stability and for their love to flourish away from the shadow of illness and poverty. But the foundation of this new chapter was built on sand, and it was about to be washed away by a tidal wave of deceit. The date was burned into Jake's memory, August 15th. It was a day that started like any other but ended with a discovery that felt like a physical blow. He came home, the word home still feeling foreign on his tongue when referring to Chloe's house, and found her. He found her in the most intimate of spaces, their bed, but she was not alone. The sight of Chloe in bed with another man was an image that would haunt him, a brutal, unforgivable betrayal that severed the fragile trust between them in an instant. The emotional pain was immediate and acute. His pride was shattered. His heart felt like it had been ripped from his chest. He didn't yell, he didn't scream. The hurt was too deep for that. He simply packed his bags, his hands trembling with a mixture of rage and profound sadness, and he left. He drove the long, lonely road back to his mother's house in Oak Grove, the world outside his car window a blur of tears and angry confusion. He was determined to be done, to cut Chloe out of his life forever, to never again be the fool who was so easily discarded. He blocked her number, he ignored her messages, he built a wall around his heart, brick by painful brick. He told himself it was over, truly, finally over. But Chloe was not a woman who accepted endings so easily. The very next morning, after she got off work at 7 a.m., she drove to his mother's house. She stood on the doorstep, a picture of contrition, but Jake was having none of it. He saw her through the window and his stomach churned. "Leave," he told her, his voice cold and firm, a stark contrast to the warmth it had once held for her. "I don't want to talk to you." He refused to open the door, letting the silence speak for his pain. He wanted her to feel the consequences of her actions, to understand the depth of the wound she had inflicted. Yet beneath his anger, a small, weak part of him was still tethered to her, a part that remembered the good times and was susceptible to her manipulations. And Chloe was a master manipulator. She knew his weaknesses, his pressures, his desperation. She knew he was trapped at his mother's house with no car, no job, and a world of hurt. And so she deployed her most potent weapon. Not an apology, not a plea for forgiveness, but a gift. A very specific, previously discussed gift. You see, before the world had collapsed, before the betrayal, they had talked about a solution to his transportation problem. Chloe, tired of his commuting struggles, had initially suggested buying him a car. But Jake, ever practical, had refused. "No, I don't want to buy a car right now," he had told her. "Insurance is too much. I can't afford it." He had counterproposed a different idea, one that was cheaper, more efficient, and admittedly carried a certain dangerous allure. "It'd just be cheaper if we got a bike," he had said, his voice perhaps tinged with excitement at the thought. "It's $20 to fill up the gas tank and I won't get caught in traffic. And then I can get to your house faster so you won't complain about me being in traffic." He had laid out the logic, the pure, simple economics of it. But he had also laid bare his financial reality. "There's no way I can afford a bike right now," he had admitted, the shame of his situation clear in his tone. "Maybe we can get an old bike for right now, just in the meantime. Just so I can come back and forth so I can be with you all the time, like you want me to be." Chloe had agreed. "Okay, that's fine." They had even sat together at the computer, scrolling through Craigslist, looking at prices, dreaming of the freedom a motorcycle could bring. It was a plan, a shared goal born from a practical need. But after the betrayal, the plan transformed. It was no longer a shared goal. It became a tool, a bargaining chip, a mechanism for control. In the days following his dramatic exit, Chloe resurrected the motorcycle idea. She contacted him, ignoring his protests, and dangled the promise of the bike like a carrot before a stubborn donkey. She framed it as her way of making amends, but to Jake and to anyone watching, it was a blatant attempt to buy back his affection, to purchase his silence, to erase her infidelity with the shiny gleam of chrome and steel. Pretty much every time she got caught doing something, Jake explained to Judge Judy, his voice heavy with a sad realization, she figured she would pretty much buy my love. And so, the dance began. Chloe started withdrawing money from her online bank, a process she claimed took several days because of withdrawal limits. The money was gathered, the deal was struck. On August 19th, just 4 days after Jake had walked out on her, vowing never to return, they were together again. Not in a romantic sense, he would later insist, but in a transactional one. They both went to the seller. They both inspected the bike. They handed over $2,400 in cash, and they drove away with the motorcycle. Jake was now the proud, albeit temporary, owner of a set of wheels. Judge Judy, with her legendary ability to cut through the emotional fog and get to the hard, cold facts, was utterly fascinated and deeply skeptical. She zeroed in on the timeline with the precision of a surgeon. "So you were able to get over your bruised ego in 4 days with the bike?" she asked Jake, her tone dripping with a mix of amusement and disbelief. Jake's response was a quiet, defeated, "pretty much." It was a confession that spoke volumes. His principles, his righteous anger, had a price tag, and that price was $2,400. The motorcycle had worked. It had lured him back into Chloe's orbit. But what followed was not a reconciliation. It was a strange, limbo-like existence. Jake did not move back in with Chloe. He maintained his residence at his mother's house. But he started going back and forth, as he put it. He would visit her, they would talk, they would see each other. The relationship was over, he claimed, but the benefits, the companionship, and the financial support, apparently, were not. Judge Judy saw right through this. "So when you said the relationship was over on the 15th or the 19th, that's a lie," she stated, not asked. Jake squirmed, trapped by his own contradictory story. He tried to reframe it, to paint himself as a noble guide trying to help a lost soul. He claimed he gave Chloe ultimatums. "If you want me to come back in your life, you have to stop drinking at 8 in the morning when you wake up," he claimed to have told her. "You have to stop lying." He presented text messages as proof of his attempts to reform her, to be a positive influence while she worked on herself. He didn't want to be the guy who just abandoned her. He said, a pathetic attempt to cloak his own dependency in the garb of chivalry. It was during this messy, undefined period that more money changed hands. Jake had gotten into some legal trouble, a separate issue that required a lawyer. The lawyer, a man named Wilkinson, required a retainer of $1,800. Jake, still without a steady paycheck, couldn't afford it. So he turned to Chloe. And Chloe, ever the provider, gave him $350 towards his legal fees. They drove to the lawyer's office together. Jake ran upstairs, handed over the cash, and came back down. It was another transaction, another string tying him to her. Meanwhile, the motorcycle, the symbol of their fractured bond, was having problems of its own. It ended up in impound. And here lay the crux of the legal dispute. Jake wanted Chloe to reimburse him for the $2,400 bike, claiming it was a gift she had now effectively stolen back. But Judge Judy immediately spotted the fatal flaw in his argument. "Who has the pink slip?" she asked the most important question in the room. The answer came from Chloe. She did. She had never signed over the title. She had retained control of the motorcycle from the very beginning. Judge Judy pounced. "Then you don't get the money for it," she told Jake. "You should have registered it and gotten it out of impound. You cannot get it out of impound because you are not the title holder. She has to do that." Jake claimed she had held it hostage, but the truth was he had never owned it. He had merely been allowed to use it. The $2,400 claim was dismissed in an instant. But the story was not over, for Chloe had a claim of her own. She wanted the $350 for the legal fees back. Judge Judy turned her attention to this, and here, Jake had no defense. He had accepted the money for a specific purpose, and while he claimed it was a gift, the circumstances suggested otherwise. Judge Judy saw it as a loan, plain and simple. "You can, however, get money for what I perceive as a loan for your legal fees," she ruled. But just as the financial matters seemed settled, the true venom of the failed relationship spilled out. Jake presented his final desperate piece of evidence, a campaign of defamation. He described receiving a Facebook message from a complete stranger, warning him about a fake profile on POF, Plenty of Fish, a dating site that was slandering his name. The profile, he was convinced, was created by Chloe. It got worse. He had text messages from his personal training clients canceling their sessions. They had heard things, they said. They had seen online articles, horrible lies claiming he used women and had unprotected sex with multiple partners. His reputation, the very thing he needed to rebuild his career, was being systematically destroyed. "She even called my job trying to get me fired," he accused, his voice rising with frustration. He presented the timeline. These events happened in October and November, months after their split. Chloe, he claimed, was on a mission to ruin him. When Judge Judy gave Chloe a chance to respond, she simply denied everything. "Everything that he said is a lie," she stated flatly, but the damage was done. The picture was complete. Judge Judy looked at Jake, a man who had traded his dignity for a motorcycle, and was now paying the price in a ruined reputation. Her final words to him were a devastating character assessment. "I'm not so quite sure that her posting online to beware of you because you use and abuse women. You actually almost conceded that yourself," she began. "You said, 'Well, I caught her cheating on me on the 15th, so I moved out. But then she said she would buy me a motorcycle 4 days later, so I moved back in. But then I didn't really move back in. I went to my mother's. I just went over to see her occasionally.' So that sounds to me like a guy who does use women." The gavel fell. The judgment was clear. Chloe would not get a dime for the motorcycle she still owned, but she would get her $350 back. Jake left with nothing but the bitter lesson that some gifts come with chains, and the cost of a bruised ego can sometimes far exceed the price of a purring engine. Lesson for the listeners and viewers. This story serves as a stark reminder that mixing love and money often leads to a toxic recipe for disaster. A gift given as an apology for a profound betrayal is not a gift. It is a payment for silence and a leash of control. Never sacrifice your self-respect for material possessions, for the temporary comfort of a gift can cost you your dignity and your reputation. Furthermore, always ensure that major financial transactions, especially those within a relationship, are clear and documented. Is it a gift or a loan? Who holds the title? Ambiguity is the breeding ground for future conflict. Finally, when a relationship ends, end it cleanly. Do not engage in a campaign of defamation or revenge, for it not only hurts the other person, but also reveals a deep bitterness that will poison your own life. Walk away, heal, and rebuild on a foundation of self-worth, not on the shaky ground of purchased affection or vengeful spite.